Hello marine biology students. In this video we're going to be learning about some of the unique properties of water and seeing how life would be different living in water as opposed to life here on land. So let's talk about some of the properties of water and why it might impact organisms living within it. In the water molecule itself, H2O, there are 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen, covalently bonded together. While this molecule itself is quite simple, water is unique in many ways. Each water molecule has a slight positive and negative electrical charge. And this is due to polar covalent bonds. Polar covalent bonds do not share electrons evenly, and so there's an electrical charge imbalance on either side of that covalent bond. The positive charges are near the hydrogen atoms, and the negative charges exist around the oxygen atoms. And this is because oxygen has a higher electronegativity, or a stronger pull on those shared electrons. The electrons spend more time around the oxygen, and since electrons have a negative charge, we have that partial negative charge near that oxygen. So here in this diagram of water molecules, we can see the water molecules themselves composed of oxygen and hydrogen. We can see the partial charges, and then also notice that there is attraction between separate water molecules based on those electrical charge differences. These attractions are called hydrogen bonds. So again, due to these slight electrical charges, water molecules are attracted to each other. The negative charge of one molecule is attracted to the positive charge of the other molecules. This attraction of one water molecule to another is known as hydrogen bonding. So it's important to realize that hydrogen bonds are not the covalent bonds holding the hydrogen to the oxygen. Instead, hydrogen bonds are the attractions between 2 separate water molecules. When we look at a group of water molecules together, water in its liquid form consists of many water molecules having hydrogen bonds with their neighbors. And these hydrogen bonds, they can break and reform and transfer from one to the other, so the individual water molecules can move in relation to each other. If these water molecules are moving fast enough, if enough kinetic energy is added to them, they can actually move so quickly that they can break the hydrogen bonds and break free of their connections of neighboring water molecules. And in that case, the water has evaporated. It has gone from a liquid form into a vapor form. So water can be found in 3 states, and it's the hydrogen bonds that end up impacting these states of water. Hydrogen bonds help keep water molecules as a cohesive group. At most temperatures found on Earth. This is the reason why we have liquid water. Water can be found in 3 different phases of matter. On the surface of the Earth, water can be found in its liquid form, in its gas form, which is water vapor, and also as a solid in the form of ice. Ice is the solid form of water that is caused by reducing the kinetic energy of the molecules. As the temperature is lowered, the hydrogen bonds lock into place, preventing water molecules from moving in relation to each other. This also holds the water molecules a bit further from each other than in liquid water. An interesting property of seawater is that it has a lower freezing point than fresh water. And as seawater begins freezing, it actually releases a concentrated salty brine, resulting in sea ice having less dissolved solute. than regular seawater. We will see that this also plays a role in driving ocean circulation. Now, the gas form of water is known as water vapor. And humidity is the amount of water vapor that's in the air. Water vapor is formed when molecules of water escape the hydrogen bonds holding them together. And in this way, they become airborne. This process, called evaporation, increases with increasing temperatures. Water is the only substance on Earth that naturally exists in all three states: solid as ice, liquid as liquid water, and gas as water vapor. The concept we're going to visit many times over as we discuss water is the concept of density. At lower temperatures, water molecules are closer to each other than at warmer temperatures. In seawater at 75 degrees, the molecules are further apart than with the same water at 35 degrees. When water molecules are closer together, the substance is said to have a greater density. Substances with higher density are heavier than those with lower density when the same volume is present. Cold water, therefore, sinks underneath the warmer water. Colder water also holds more oxygen. Than the same volume of warm water, a crucial factor for organisms living at the ocean floor. Even though colder water is more dense than warmer water, this changes when the water gets cold enough to freeze. Ice is less dense than liquid water due to the distance between the water molecules increasing as the hydrogen bonds lock into place. This is why ice floats. This is important for organisms living in areas where freezing temperatures are common, such as in the Arctic Ocean or around Antarctica. This is also key to life on planet Earth as we know it. Now, this may sound like a bit of a stretch, but if water were to sink after it froze, that layer of ice would sink, crushing all life below it, and it would settle at the bottom. So it really would prevent life from surviving underneath ice. If ice did not float, a body of water would also freeze from the bottom up, or in layers of freezing and sinking. Eventually, the whole body of water would freeze. Even though we think of it as being cold, ice is an excellent insulator. Since ice floats, the floating ice creates a barrier between the cold air temperature and the water below the ice, keeping it from freezing. In addition to hydrogen bonds, water has other unique chemical properties. One is a high latent heat of melting. The latent heat of melting is the amount of energy needed to change water in state from ice into liquid, or conversely, the amount of heat that needs to be taken away to convert liquid water into ice. Water has a higher latent heat of melting than many other commonly occurring substances. This means that ice melts at a relatively high temperature, and it absorbs a great deal of heat as it melts. Water also absorbs a great deal of heat before its temperature rises. This property is known as heat capacity. And it is defined as the amount of heat required to raise a substance's temperature by a given amount. Water has a very high heat capacity, making it resistant to easily changing temperature. This high heat capacity is significant for marine organisms. Because it means that they are not subjected to the wide temperature ranges so often seen on land. An exception is very shallow water, like tide pools, which warm quickly due to the relatively small volumes of water and can subject certain marine organisms to sudden, drastic temperature changes. A great deal of heat is also required for evaporation to occur. The amount of heat required for a substance to evaporate is known as the latent heat of evaporation, or the latent heat of vaporization. Water has a very high latent heat of evaporation. This means that it takes a lot of energy for liquid water to become water vapor without changing its temperature, when water is changing its states of matter. Its temperature does not change until the state change is complete. The extra energy goes to the state change instead of temperature change. So here in this graph, we can see the temperature of water over time with a constant amount of heat being added to it. So we see that as the ice starts warming up, starts being warmed, there's a pause in temperature change as all the ice melts into liquid water. Once the water is liquid, the temperature increases again until it hits a level where that liquid water is being converted into gas. This is also why boiling water reaches a maximum temperature and will not go higher unless pressure is increased. That'll be the end of this video, but we'll have a bit more to discuss about the properties of water in the next video. Thanks for your attention. See you then.